All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, everyone, my name is Daryl Sladden. I'm a senior product manager at Cisco. I'm really focusing on how to take all those great APs that Fred talked about and create applications that can help you get back to business. So I do a lot of locations areas in general, but what we've been focusing on is with COVID, there's some unique data that is in your wireless network that can really help to speed up the return to office in a safe and effective manner. So a couple of the applications, and so we're going to go through all those couple of different applications that we're shipping now. And again, you can jump in and ask questions as to how these things work. So first of all, what is Cisco DNA Spaces? Well, it's our next generation cloud platform. So after an acquisition about a year and a half ago, that's actually almost 2 years ago, of a cloud platform from a company called July Systems, we made a concerted effort to focus switching our location calculation and our compute pipeline from an on-premises application to a cloud-based application to really take advantage and lean in with some of the benefits that you get in the cloud. Scale, the ability to try new algorithms, the ability to aggregate data, have a lot of ways of connecting to different applications. That's really the evolution of DNA Spaces, where we've reduced the on-premises footprint. So the amount of compute that's required on your individual physical plant is much smaller. The on-prem CMX server used to be a 20 CPU, 64 gig, bit of a behemoth. Now, with a 2 CPU connector box, we can aggregate the data that comes off your controller, those existing controller packets, whether they be NMSP or some of the new packets that are coming off of the APs, such as Fast Locate, that gets aggregated at the connector and then sent up into the cloud. And then in the cloud, we can then offer this complete end-to-end application as a service, right? So 30 minutes to activate, we've got applications that you can start to click on and start to see value. And that's really been the focus that we're looking at, is how these applications that are can provide immediate value. And in this era of returning to work, there's some things that the wireless network uniquely has that we can look at. And so using a school as an example, we can look at an academic school wanting to go back. How can they make sure that their campus is safe to open up? They want to see how this has impacted, right? If you've got some analytics or some history as to where the number of the Wi-Fi devices that were previously on your network, what's going on now, that's a really good proxy of people's behavior in your space. And you can use that to understand what's the rate of people coming back, what are they doing now that's different than they were before. And then personalized guest experiences. As you have guests specifically come to your space, is there a way of providing a contactless message? So instead of having to have a receptionist, maybe tell them that the policies are this area is closed 2 to 4 on every day for additional cleaning. You can do that with things like a captive portal specific to the location. And so that's one of those examples of things that we're going to talk a little bit about. And then just operational efficiency, better understanding where things are can continue to make your place safer. So Cisco, we use it for understanding where the cleaning carts are located as an example of a mobile asset that's moving around, to be able to say, okay, we just had a big meeting here. They're going to do some additional cleaning about how long before we open the space up again. So just in that context, there's lots of different understanding of lots of different applications that DNA Spaces can take advantage of to help get back to business. And then how we look at the IT team is that the IT team really focuses on solving these challenges, whether they be the safety and compliance group, right, where they want to be able to understand, are you completing these particular methods, right? Are you making sure that no more than one person for every 200 square feet, because that's about the space that you need to ensure social distancing. From analytics, from the historical analytics, do I need to know what's the ramp up of people that are coming back so I can figure out what's going to happen in a couple more months? Contactless experience. Again, we were just talking about, location specific messages and that operational efficiency by understanding where things are in your space. I'm going to do a lot of this with going back and forth to a real application, just because I'm more of I like to actually look at the code as opposed to the slides about what we're doing at it. So behavior metrics. So this is one of the first applications that helps you understand what's going on in your space. So behavior metrics are aggregated on a monthly basis and give you key variables such as the number of people in the space and the location of where they are in your network, right? So you've got your entire wireless network across multiple buildings, floors, and then zones, and you can do individual allocations of those spaces. And we aggregate all that information on a monthly basis, but it's very easy to compare. So it's all about benchmarking these locations against historically in your own space and against other organizations and industry averages. So that's really the key value of business metrics. And so let's take a look at how that looks. So again, in DNA Spaces, we have the business metrics capability where you can look at individual spaces, right? And so we can say, hey, what's the average visit duration across locations? You can hover over the red line and say my organizational average for the month of June is 139 minutes. And how often the frequency, it's about 10 visits per month, right? And so this is, and then you can hover on any individual bullet point to be able to say what my percentile is as I move up that rank. So more than about 50% of my sites have a visit of 8.8 visits per month. So this is the type of information that we can aggregate over business metrics, get you understanding the information about what's my busiest areas, what's my least busy areas. I can hover over any of those and better understand what's going on there, as well as my average area. The second type of analytics that are helpful is, well, if I want to maybe dice and slice some of these analytics and say, yeah, that's important, but yeah, I want to do it by a particular SSID, right? I want to understand the difference between my guest SSID and my employee SSID, or this monthly aggregation that's available in the standard analytics is not what I'm looking for. I want to be able to do a little bit more of dice and slicing. And to that, we offer location analytics, where we don't do a lot of our normalization. So this is much more access to the raw data, where you'll just be able to say, yep, let's look at what's going on right now. And in this case, I can then go over to my location analytics and be able to say, based on all the SSIDs, what are the number of visitors, right? So I can say that, I can get this nice chart as to what was previously going on. I can see where my winter break normally is. And then I can notice, what's happened post-COVID. So I can get that really great understanding. And then as I get more and more of this data over longer periods of time, I can start to see how this is going to ramp up. But the selection criteria can be any type of time I'm selecting. So instead of having that monthly only view that is in behavior metrics, I can select, just what's going on, for example, over the last 15 days, and it will give you that report. Or, going back to a more, pre and post COVID, maybe it's in this current year. So it's the 213th day into this year, and you can obviously see sometime as the event occurred in March, we've had this dramatic drop down in the number of wireless devices on your networks.
So Daryl, question about this: is Cisco calling this contact tracing?
No, that's an application that's coming up soon. So that we've got a couple of things. The first type of applications are about location analytics and behavior analytics. What we do have, and I'll show that in a little bit, is proximity reporting.
And with the proximity reporting, are we validating and educating the customers the density of APs that are required for, let's say, 1 to 2 meter fidelity?
Yeah, so we're very clear, and we've got lots of disclaimers that proximity reporting is about a 10 meter fidelity. That is what we're very specific on the nature of Wi-Fi, the fidelity of the contact that we are going to be able to report with a 99% possibility is at 10 meters, and we're very specific on that. We don't put anything in our reports that are going to be less than that, because we want to make clear that's really the safe and sort of responsible estimate that you're going to be able to get. Being able to say, yeah, these people were 3 meters away or 2 meters away, that's not something that a Wi-Fi is going to be able to get in a repeatable manner.
Thank you.
Hey, Daryl?
Yeah.
Oh, good. My mic's working now. I'm curious where you guys are pulling, what all is feeding the data for, visitors,
Yeah,
all of the stuff that's feeding in.
Yeah, so great. So what? So the idea is that what data do we get? So what we get from our controller is sort of this digitization stats will kind of show you what's going on with these 1.8 billion updates. What that literally is what's called the NMSP messages. So every time a device does an 802.11k, anytime it does a roam, we get a message from the controller. Every 5 minutes for every device, we get a message from the controller. Every time a device associates to the network, we get a message from the controller. And these are all very raw level messages that this device connected to this AP at this time, or what's called our info stats that says, hey, in the last 5 minutes, this device sent this number of packets. Don't know where they were, but just as a keep alive, sent this number of packets at this particular time. So that is the raw data that we're getting. It's a proprietary connection that comes off our controller, goes to our connector, and then we make sense of this data in the cloud by using that to put locations on a map and then aggregating those locations together.
So another question, Daryl, if I could just zoom you out, this I think makes a lot of assumptions. So just fill us in on what else is needed in the environment. Obviously, DNA Spaces needs DNA, so the customers have gone that far, right? What else is?
Well, that's more of a branding thing. The DNA Spaces can work with any customer network that is 8.0 or later with a wireless controller 8.0. 8.8 and above work better because there were some NMSP messages that we improved over that time. But any controller 8.0 or better will provide the basic capability of the network. The next thing that you need is if you want to do mapping-based solutions where I say, I know that this area, this device is in this zone, I need to put my APs on a map. So to put my APs on a map, I need Prime, right? I need Prime, or for my most modern networks, I need DNA Center. But that's one of the real capabilities of DNA Spaces is in our setup, we have this sort of setup guide where we have different wireless networks can be connected, right? You can either connect directly from your wireless controller with a Spaces connector. This is our preferred method of how you log in. And we also support all of these solutions on the Meraki's network, whether it be a Meraki login or an AP key. So it's a very wide set of networks that can be added into DNA Spaces. And the more detailed information I have, such as APs on maps from Prime, the more detailed the applications that I can get out.
And for the contact tracing versus just normal day-to-day client location stuff, what additional licenses are required?
Great question. So the proximity reporting, and so we'll jump into that proximity report because there seems to be some questions on that. The proximity reporting application is a part of our ACT license. And so this means I'm going to run our richest level of DNA Spaces. And so it says, yeah, I want to do an ACT license. How you create a report for proximity reporting is I think I have a username here. One of the requirements is it's really going to be username based. So I need to have a 802.11x network or some network where my controller has usernames. So if I've ever gone to my show client base, I can look at those controller usernames that are distinct. And I can say, oh, these are the individual users, whether they be Active Directory usernames or email-based usernames, a Radius server, an ICE server, any authentication mechanism. That returns a username to the controller. That's the thing that provides a contactable identifier, right? Raw MAC addresses, especially with the era of rotating MACs, are not going to be really helpful. You need to have something that's contactable. So in this case, we've got a username. And when we look up that username to do a proximity report for contact tracing, you're going to say, well, I see a bunch of different MAC addresses which have logged on with that username, right? And some of these guys would be maybe wireless speaker devices. Some of them will be your actual mobile phones. And I'll say, oh, okay, the ones that I'm interested in doing this proximity report that says, where was this device over the last period of time, might be this Apple device, right? And says, oh, I know, but he sometimes carries his iPad and not his Android. In this case, this person maybe has his Apple, but it was only seen the last time July 9th. Okay, so we're going to do a proximity report and aggregate both sets of data. And then we're going to look at a time range. The time range is really all about when that person reported and what was going on. So like saying, let's say they reported on the 30th, I'm going to look back no more than 28 days, but in this case, let's say just look back 10 days. So we're going to report from July 20th to July 30th. And when I generate that report, it's going to be doing a lot of crazy amount of computations. And so what will appear is that will appear in this requested state. And so that requested state just means that, yeah, I'm going to be running gigantic amount of computations and calculations. It'll probably take about 30 minutes, right? So come back in 30 minutes and then you'll see the completed report. So I'm going to be like a Martha Stewart here and click on a completed report so that we'll pull it out of the oven just to see what it looks like. And so what a completed report would look like would have a couple of different components. It's really about answering two questions. One of the things that's really important is we never want to talk about the person who reported because that doesn't really matter. What we're looking at is what was the impact on the space to help me figure out what additional cleaning I need to do. What was the impact on the other people? Maybe I need to figure out who I need to contact. And so those are the things that we look at from the report. So in this case,
just help me understand what happens if, I'll just say it. The person gets wind of, okay, there's contact tracing going on, and I'm going to turn off my phone. I mean,
nothing.
Where I'm going with that is, this can't be the only thing
100%.
Does this work in conjunction with what? How is this presented as only being part of the contact tracing solution? Just conversationally.
Yeah, absolutely. Conversationally. This is a tool that's provided to the people who own the wireless networks or they own the spaces that you may be in as a way of having that discussion. So if a person reports that, yeah, I've had positive, well, what do I have? Other tools they use are badging systems that may be able to say, yeah, I know you were in buildings 14 and 15. They may just, and that's really about the day-to-day interview with that person. That's the majority of the work. All we're doing is creating a tool that makes that interview a little bit easier, because the interview would say, your device, according to your device location that you were in building 17 and 18. Oh yeah, I forgot. I remember I went to the library that day, or I had a group dinner with all these people. I don't remember who they are. Oh, these are the names that we saw that were also there at the same time. So this is used in conjunction with a manual contact tracing interview in all cases.
So what does this look like with MAC randomization? It seems like these reports are very tied into the MAC address.
Yeah, great question. So with MAC randomization, what we're really focusing on is the 802.1x authenticated username. That's the key to our database. The Macs that we actually show are only if they are broadcasting with the hardware Mac. If they broadcast with a privacy Mac, as iOS 14 will start to do, and Android has done for a little bit, we will not be showing any, because privacy Macs don't really mean anything. But what does continue to be effective is the 802.1x authenticated username. And so we're not going to be able to do things, let's say a guest network that's completely, everyone logs on with a pre-shared key. There's no Wi-Fi contact tracing there because it's all private Macs and pre-shared keys. But in environments where I do have a username, such as businesses or campus environments for students, where I do have an individual, this user Daryl logged on with at this time, that's where Wi-Fi based proximity reporting can really be valuable.
Daryl, let me poke into that a little bit and ask. So obviously a lot of organizations and enterprise use certificates, and a lot of higher ed uses Eduroam, which is a certificate authority that's managed by somebody else. So how is that user correlation happening in those cases?
So in those cases, that correlation, you're required to go back to the certificate authority. So you will either be going back to Eduroam with a identified the user identifier, or in the case of ICE or other applications that provide that identifier, they'll go back to say, oh, this certificate is issued to this particular user. So we will the level of reporting at Cisco DNA Spaces proximity reporting gives you that up to that certificate. Using that certificate to then go back is going to be that manual process. And so the output of the proximity report, again, is going to be this person who decided they were going to have an interview, the interview was going to be done with HR, said, oh, where am I located? Well, I went to Washington Hall and Smith Hall, and how many hours was I in these two particular locations? And so that's where they're going to be focusing on some advanced cleaning of those particular spaces. Similarly, they'll be able to say, and again, this is where we are very conservative as to what can we report. We can report with veracity that we are within 10 meters. We're not going to be saying anything like a 1 or 2 meter level accurate of determination. We're going to say you're within 10 meters, you're on the same floor, but farther than 10 meters apart, or you're in the same building, but not on the same floor, right? And so that allows the person who was doing this interview to say, yeah, I want to contact everyone, because what we find is that a lot of businesses would just say, well, if somebody's reported, I'm going to have to contact everybody in the company to give them a policy. What we're trying to do is to do a reasonable limitation of that says, if people weren't in the same building or the same floor or the same within 10 meters, maybe they don't need that same level of sheltering that other ones would do. And then from a time perspective, we aggregate the time that they spent together, right? So these are people who have spent a total of more than 4 hours, less than 4 hours, more than 15 minutes. And those are sort of our time aggregation buckets where you can decide, well, the riskiest thing is if I'd spent more than 4 hours within 30 feet of this person, those are probably the people that I'm going to have a more immediate need to contact. And whereas I can then make the risk decision to say, well, these people were on the same floor, but I know that they weren't within the same 30 meters or their devices were not. What's the contact information I want to do there?
Daryl, one more, sorry.
Yeah,
I know this is all Wi-Fi based right now, and I don't want to, if this is for later, just tell me. But obviously, we know that BLE and or app-based tracking gives a, more granular location. How does that fit into all of this?
So what we do for our BLE asset tag based location is we look at the Wi-Fi network as a partner for RFID tags or as a BLE scanning device that can be partnered with. So we partner with companies like AeroScout and Contact, and they provide the GUI that actually would report that says these two badges were within contact with each other.
Okay, so this would be using this interface is Wi-Fi only, and then there would be something else to use for anything that's BLE based.
Correct. If they went with a badge around the neck, but what we're finding is that's a very expensive solution. People may want to be looking at that, and it really is a decision that they make on a per location basis to say, yeah, we are going to put badges around everyone's neck. They're going to have that new policy, whereas the benefit of using your existing Wi-Fi network as a tool to help that contact tracing interview is it really allocates really well with people's existing behavior, right? People like to carry their phones around generally. They generally are connected to wireless. So as a tool to help with that contact tracing interview, the using your existing wireless is a great way of starting that. Yeah. So that final part of that is that day-wise journey where if I'm going to be interviewing this person, say, where were you on campus for the last 14 days? They're like, oh, I don't remember, right? So with the history that they've collected around their individual device, we can say, oh, we noticed your device was not here on these days, but it was here on Thursdays. Oh, on that Thursday was at Smith Hall's first floor or Washington Hall. Oh yeah, I remember. I had a lunch meeting on that particular day.
Daryl, can I poke once more? And I'm sorry, I just want to wrap my head around all of this. So obviously, contact tracing and prox tracing is really important to a lot of people and a lot of our customers.
Mm-hmm.
So, because now I'm kind of piecing together, what percentage would you say of based on aggregated data, do you think of your users use 8021X with something like PEEP and an actual username versus a device certificate on something handheld like a phone? Because I don't see that frequently.
We've been finding in university spaces that the ability, so do you have the ability to understand that this particular certificate I have a contactable address? So what we call it is a contactable address based on that. And so we're finding over 80% of our customers have some way of, hey, if I've gotten a username that's off the controller, can I contact that person? And that contactable address, again, could be going back to an ICE database, could be going back to some Euroroam, going back to some other certificate authority. But we find a very high percentage seem to have a contactable interface. Again, of the two verticals that we're really focusing on, which is enterprise carpeted spaces. companies like Cisco or Facebook or somebody else that says, yep, I have an 802.1x user who log onto my wireless for security, or different schools that are saying, yeah, I know that these are the users that are logging onto my, I give each individual user some particular user ID that I can then contact. So we were jumping right into this. So just some of the other comments I would have on contact tracing is, as we had a lot of inundation for, the Google, Apple, like that's the way we're going to be tracing it with Google, Apple. Those APIs are really only for government organizations. So if you're going to have discussions with customers, that's not going to be something that's going to solve your problem, because the Google, Apple background APIs are only available for government applications. And so you're probably not going to use them. So, okay, well, maybe I build my own application at my school that will be able to say, yeah, these two phones are within contact. Well, then the experience is really bad. Low battery life. The app has to be running in the foreground. The devices, if they're put to sleep, are not going to be reporting. So it's really not a very effective solution. So you need to acknowledge that, well, I need to have something that emits off that person that is contactable, right? That contactable address is so important. Contact tracing, it's about it. How do I actually contact that? And so if I have some device like an RFID tag on them, or if I have the phone itself that connects to wireless, that's what I can then contact with. And then as we were talking about number 4, right, leaning into that student's behavior of, yeah, I'm carrying around a phone and I have some way of going back to my controller and saying this phone belongs to this person. That's the least invasive, easy, cheap way for the solution to be able to report today. It can be turned on. If it finds out that you're not as effective, you can try it for a couple of months and then turn it off. As opposed to some of these larger systems that say, no, I'm going to require everybody to have a badge around their neck, and everyone's going to be carrying one of these, and it needs to be recharged, or I need to have some particular battery life, so I need to monitor the life, or I have RFID tags as the other way of being able to connect these. So if I have either tags that are RFID or BLE, that requires a lot more infrastructure to charge and maintain that this belongs to a person. Whereas phones, people like to keep their own phones, right? So they take a lot more responsibility on making sure that this is part of it. And so with this with this as the context, that's where Cisco's come up with our proximity reporting application. And again, the proximity reporting application, works as an 802.1x is the key for contacting that user. We need to know that contact. It calculates the location of the person as they look, every minute. This is part of the regular location records that are being written as part of our location service platform. Again, DNA Spaces now has that, and luckily we have this tool, because then the rest of the thing is that the tool then aggregates that these two devices were in the same floor, building, or zone for X number of hours, more than 4, less than 4, more than 15. The report itself, because it is this very large amount of aggregated data, we can take up to about 30 minutes, but the report can be run immediately. Some of our competitors have to run the report maybe the next day, but we can run the report immediately after at any time. It just then puts into a queue and takes between 1 and 30 minutes to generate it. What's the output of the report? The output of the report is really 3 things. There's either that GUI that we showed you that showed these are the buildings, floors, and zones that you're at. These are the other people that were in those same buildings and zones. And this is your day-wise journey. But we also can output this as a PDF report for sharing to the HR, again, without any username ever on that report. And we also integrate by an output to a CSV file. So if I do need to do contact tracing that has all these certificates, I need to do the lookup. I now have an outputted CSV file that says, oh, these are the usernames that I need to go for. These are the user identities that I have in my controller that I need to now find a username for. So I can then submit that to an application with ICE or other sort of lookup applications to be able to say, these are the contactable names based on these usernames that are in my controller. And then finally, from a security point of view, we want to make sure that there's never a name on the report of who was reported. We auto-delete the reports after 30 days, and you need to have specific authority inside of DNA Spaces to run those reports. So that was a little bit about proximity reporting as one of the tools that effectively helps people get back to work. That our closing summary here, I'll go to, is that there's several reports that we have for COVID-19. The proximity reporting is certainly one that a lot of people are interested in. The other one I didn't have a lot of time to go on about, but is used very effectively in a lot of spaces, is the ability to use a number of Wi-Fi devices to put signage up that says this is the number of people in these particular spaces. This is a very effective solution for helping you understand how I'm going to open, because think of it, I have a really good count of the number of associated devices in a space. That's a great proxy for the number of people in that space. And then using that in a signage solution, whether from Cisco signage or our partners like AppSpace or Industrial Weapons, can create a really great closed loop system that takes advantage of Wi-Fi and helps people understand whether or not the spaces are safe to go into. Those are three of the main applications for helping open up the spaces after COVID: analytics, signage, and our Right Now application and proximity reporting. I hope that's been helpful.